So on Friday, you took your Unit 1A test, so we finished that unit, and so now we're jumping into the next unit, which is Unit 1B. And on this unit, we're actually going to talk more specifically about biology stuff. The prior unit mostly talked about just science in general, scientific method, things like that. Even microscopes are just a general tool in science, even though they benefit biology quite a bit. It's more of just kind of a general science thing. So now we're actually jumping into some real biology stuff. And the new priority standard that we have here: discuss distinguishing characteristics of life and of living organisms, including the classification of the domains and kingdoms in which they are grouped. So what we're going to be focusing on in this unit, Unit 1B, is what makes something alive, and how do we go about categorizing and grouping living things? So how do we describe what life is? Okay, that's kind of the focus that we have here. The question of what makes something alive is actually more complicated than you might think. I mean, it's pretty obvious looking at a human that we're alive, but it's not as obvious when you look at like a tree and say, okay, what makes that tree alive? Or looking at a mushroom and saying, well, what makes that mushroom alive? Okay, there are certain characteristics that all living things share. So we need to define what those characteristics are to better understand what makes something alive and what makes something not alive. And there are instances where scientists will look at something and say, is this really alive? And one of the prime examples of that would be a virus. I mean, we're all dealing with a virus right now, but as we go through these characteristics, there are 6 characteristics of living things, we'll find that viruses don't meet all those characteristics, which makes us ask, well, if it's not alive, then how do viruses make us sick? What is it about a virus that actually works? Okay. So this is something that scientists actually spend a lot of time thinking about because they're not quite sure how exactly to classify a virus. Are they alive? Are they not alive? If they're not alive, then how do they work? It's an important kind of distinction to make. So if we come across some substance, like some slime on the wall, and we're asking, well, is that slime a living thing? And that, of course, is like the plot line of a lot of horror movies, is like, what is that thing? Oh, it's alive! So yeah, we can investigate and say, okay, does this slime, whatever it is, does it meet all the criteria that living things would meet? Before we get started, there is some terminology here that we use on a regular basis in biology. So the first one is the term organism. So the word organism is to describe an individual living thing. So this is just kind of a generic term that we use to describe a living thing, instead of like calling everything a person. So you wouldn't look at a tree and call it a person. Okay, so we use the term organism as just a generic description of a living thing. Okay. And derived from the word organism, we get the term organic. So an organic substance is anything that is derived from a living thing. So obviously, your body is organic because you are alive and your body is part of what makes you alive. So we would call your body organic. A tree is organic. But everything that comes from your body is also organic. So anything you leave behind is also considered organic. So for example, when a living thing dies, okay, its dead body, although not technically alive anymore, that body came from a living thing, so it's still considered organic. Now, if we bury that body for, let's say 65 million years, okay, and we dig it up as a fossil, like dinosaurs, okay, that dinosaur fossil is still considered organic material. Because even though it's been dead for 65 million years, those bones, that fossil came from a living thing, so it's still considered an organic substance. We can go even more extreme than that. Coal. Okay, Lakeland Electric burns coal in its power plant. That coal is an organic substance because 350 million years ago, that coal was once plant matter living inside of some swampy bog. Okay, when those plants died, they get compressed, and then geological forces act on those dead plants, and it becomes coal. when we are burning coal, we're burning organic matter. And we can go even more extreme than that. 1 billion years ago, there were tiny marine organisms, algae, that died and sunk to the bottom of the ocean, got compressed into the earth, and become petroleum, okay, over the course of hundreds of millions of years. So when you put gasoline in a car, you're putting an organic substance, because it was derived from a once living thing, into your car. There's an entire branch of chemistry called organic chemistry, analyzing the makeup of these organic substances. And we're actually going to get into a little bit of that in Unit 2. Okay, that's where we're going to talk about the chemistry of life. Now, the opposite of organic, of course, would be inorganic. These are substances derived from non-living things. Now, we got to be careful. If you were to scoop up a handful of dirt, you can't say that that dirt is inorganic, because there could be organic stuff in that dirt. In fact, what makes dirt useful for plants to grow in is that there's organic nutrients inside that dirt. So generally when we're talking about inorganic substances, we're talking about minerals. So salt is inorganic. Metals, so if you have iron or gold or silver, those are inorganic substances. So usually pure minerals or pure elements are considered inorganic. Now, even if you have a rock, that rock could have organic bits inside of it as well. So you got to be kind of careful what's organic, what's not organic. Okay, so that actually brings us to the first formative question. So we have the term organic and we have the term inorganic. The difference is that prefix in. So in context, what does that prefix in actually mean? Okay, think about the words inorganic or inexperienced or insane. Okay, what are we saying there? Okay, do we mean inside? Do we mean not? Do we mean without? Do we mean living? So there are 6 characteristics that define living things. Okay, and the first one is probably the most obvious of all of them, and this is one of the easiest ones to check for. So if we have some sort of unknown slime on the wall, and if we wanted to know, is that slime alive, the easiest thing to do is to check if it's composed of cells. All living things are made out of cells. The cell is the smallest working unit of life. So if we have some slime on the wall, and we have a microscope, and we have the know-how, we could take a sample of that slime, throw it underneath the microscope, and we could check to see if it's made out of cells. If it is, then, yep, that thing's probably alive. If there's no cells that are detectable, then maybe it's some sort of other substance, some sort of chemical reaction that we need to explain. Now, when we say the cell is the smallest working unit of life, what we mean is that the cell is the smallest thing that has everything necessary to carry out all the functions of life. So there's 5 more characteristics of life. A single cell can carry out all those other characteristics by itself. Now, if I was to pluck a cell from your body and put it on the desk in front of you, that cell would die pretty quickly, because that cell is not designed to survive on the desk in front of you. Much like if I pluck a polar bear out of the Arctic and drop it in the Amazon rainforest, that polar bear wouldn't last very long, because it's not made to live in the tropics. If I was to take a shark out of the ocean and put it in my living room, that shark would not live that long in my living room, because a shark is not designed to live in that environment. Okay, so same thing, if I just pluck a cell out of your body, it's not going to live very long. However, if I take a cell from your body and I put it in the right conditions in a laboratory, not only can I keep that cell alive, I can grow that cell into more cells. I could pluck a skin cell from your body and I can grow those skin cells in a lab. So a single cell has everything necessary to be alive and to stay alive given the right conditions. Now, organisms, a living thing, can consist of just a single cell. So in our microscope notes, we saw a picture of a paramecium. That is what we call a single-celled organism, or another term that we might use is unicellular. Okay. Now, humans and dogs and cats and oak trees and mushrooms are what we call multicellular organisms. These are organisms made out of many cells. So we organize cells in a couple different ways, and you're probably familiar with these terms. So if we have a bunch of similar cells all working together, they form what we call a tissue. So a tissue is basically a layer of cells, similar cells, that are all doing the same kind of job. Now, if we have a lot of tissues layered together to perform some function inside the body, we call that an organ. If we have muscle cells layered together, we form muscle tissue. Now, if we take some muscle tissue and layer those with some other kinds of tissues, like nervous tissue and what is called connective tissue and even fat tissue, we can form an organ like the heart. Okay, that heart performs a special function inside the body, namely pumping blood. Now, the heart doesn't work by itself, so if we take an organ and hook it together with other organs, all performing some bigger function in the body, we call that an organ system. And then obviously you can have many organ systems all working together, your circulatory system, your digestive system, your reproductive system, to make a big organism. An organism can exist on any level of organization. So there are some organisms, of course, that are just a single cell. There are some organisms that are nothing more than a few layers of tissue. A good example of that would be like a jellyfish. Jellyfish have a layer of tissues on the outside. They have a layer of tissue on the inside, forming what we would describe as their gut. And then you have basically what is called mesoglia. That's the jelly on the inside. But that's about it. Jellyfish don't really have true organs the way that we think of organs. They don't have a heart, they don't have a brain, okay, but they still function perfectly well. Then, of course, we can have some organisms that have organs, but not true organ systems. So those organs kind of like do their job independently. They don't have like a bunch of friends working together to keep things going. So a good example of that would be kind of like a starfish. Okay, starfish have individual organs, but they don't really have extensive organ systems. Now, they have actually a few organ systems, but like their digestive system is really just like one organ. And then, of course, if you have something like a human, you have multiple organ systems all working together to make a complex living thing. The second characteristic is living things need to be able to grow and to develop. All living things need the ability to increase in size, to produce new structures, and to repair or replace old structures. Now, if you're a single-celled organism, the way that you're going to get bigger is by basically increasing the size of your cell. But there's a limit to that. And there are reasons that we'll get into later on in the year, but cells can only get so big. This is the reason why we need microscopes to be able to see them, because there's a maximum limit to how big a cell can get and still function properly. It's due to kind of the chemistry of that cell. So in order to get a bigger organism than, say, a microscopic cell, we need to have more cells. Instead of trying to grow bigger and bigger cells, we simply add more cells to the mix. In order to grow new structures, to increase in size, we're simply going to make more cells. And this is how we typically repair damage as well. If you're a single-celled organism, okay, and you get some damage, that might be it for you. You may not be able to repair yourself. Okay, there might be some fixes you can make, but a lot of times if an organism is a single cell and that cell gets damaged, they're dead. Now, you as a person are multicellular, so you have lots of cells in your body. And if a few cells get damaged, you can simply replace those cells. So let's say we get like a paper cut on the end of our finger. Now, if you look at that paper cut at a microscopic level, what's literally happening is the skin cells in your finger are getting shredded to pieces. So those cells are being ripped apart. Now, instead of trying to like repair those cells, the body says, oh, those are gone. They throw those cells away, and we simply make new cells to replace them. And your skin actually grows relatively quickly, so that's why a paper cut might last for 2 or 3 days, but then is gone. Your body actually makes a new layer of skin about once every 12 hours. In fact, if you kind of like look at your arm, the skin on the outside of your arm, this is the oldest skin. This is actually dead and dying skin. And if you go like this, a microscopic cloud of dead skin cells comes flying off. In your home, anywhere between 30 to 70% of dust that you find in a common household is actually dead skin cells. Have fun with that the next time you have to dust your home. Those are like the outside layers are kind of the dead and dying cells. Now, if you've ever like skinned your knee or scraped your elbow or something and you get down to like the skin that's like really raw and pink, okay, that's the living cells. That's like the live new skin cells. Okay, so your skin grows from kind of the inside out. Okay, and you're basically replacing your layers of skin about every 12 hours. So this is how we can repair damage. Now, like more severe damage, like if you're chopping vegetables or something and you slice your finger really bad, okay, that obviously is going to take a lot longer to repair and regrow the cells. And in some cases, the damage is so severe, the body cannot repair itself adequately to keep functioning. And this is why something severe, like maybe a gunshot wound, will kill you, okay, and your body just doesn't like heal up over it, is because it's just too severe of damage. And then you have to deal with other things like blood loss and all of that. Another thing that living things have to be able to do is they have to be able to develop over time. In order to go from like a baby human to an adult-sized human, what do we have to do? Well, we literally have to increase in size. Okay, so we're going to actually add more cells. So the difference between a baby and an adult is the number of cells in their body. But also there's developmental changes. Over time, the body changes to become an adult form. In biology, basically the definition of being an adult is being able to make babies. You guys, as teenagers, are going through developmental changes. We call it puberty. You guys get yelled at all the time about your hormones and stuff. But basically, this is your body changing from a child form to an adult form. Okay, so it's going through developmental changes. Now, in humans, those developmental changes are mostly chemical. So you got some chemistry going on inside your body, and that's what the hormones are doing. But if you look at something like a caterpillar, okay, that caterpillar is going to go through some more severe developmental changes. So when the caterpillar wraps itself up in a chrysalis or a cocoon, depending on whether it's a butterfly or a moth, okay, that caterpillar is going to transform itself into almost an entirely different kind of organism. That is extreme developmental change that we call metamorphosis. And kind of a side note on that, a lot of people seem to think that, oh, when the caterpillar wraps itself in that chrysalis, all it's doing is like sprouting a beautiful pair of wings, and then it comes out and it's a caterpillar with wings, right? Well, no. If you look at a caterpillar versus look at the insect that comes out as a butterfly or a moth, they have very different kinds of bodies. So what's going on there? In the process of that metamorphosis, the caterpillar's body basically liquefies. It turns into kind of a goo of cells, and those cells rearrange themselves in a lot of different ways. So if you were to take a cocoon and cut it open in the middle of the process, you're going to get a puddle of goo, not like a caterpillar growing wings. It's really fascinating, and scientists are still trying to understand all the mechanisms that go on in making that happen. In order for growth to happen, we need to be able to obtain raw materials for building new cells. So again, if I get a paper cut, in order to make the new cells, to repair that paper cut, I need the building blocks for those cells. I mean, if I'm going to build a house, I need wood and bricks and concrete blocks and concrete and all that. So I need the building materials for making that house. So your body needs the building materials for making those cells, but also the energy necessary to power that process. So the next formative question here, in terms of cells and growth, what might one infer, again, remember making an inference, what might one infer about the difference between an elephant and a mouse? A, elephants are larger than mice because their cells are bigger. B, mice are smaller than elephants because their cells are smaller. C, elephants are larger than mice because they have more cells. Or D, mice are smaller than elephants because they start with a different number of cells. Now, in order to make those cells, in order to have those cells, we need to have the raw material and the energy to do that work. This takes us to point number 3. Living things have complex chemistry. Now, it's a very kind of like general way of putting it. So you, as a person, are basically just a walking chemical reaction. Because everything that's going on inside of you, a lot of the stuff going on that's keeping you alive are chemical reactions. In order to move your muscles, to take notes, there's chemical reactions going on inside your muscle cells. In order to think, how smart Mr. Wassman is, there's chemistry going on inside of your brain. Okay, so all of that comes down to like the chemistry of your body. When we talk about the complex chemistry of living things, we generally have to talk about how do we get useful materials for our bodies, for like building new cells, and then how do we get the energy necessary to power those processes. And all of this typically comes from food. And now, if you're a human or any other animal, you're going to be eating stuff, okay, eating food. If you're a plant, then you can make your own food through the process of photosynthesis, but it's the same thing. You're gathering what you need in order to keep yourself alive. And we generally call the chemistry of the body metabolism. And you probably hear a lot of people use the word metabolism, but a lot of people misuse the term metabolism or misunderstand what metabolism means. So metabolism is basically the chemistry of the body, and we can break that chemistry down into three major areas. Okay, the first one is probably what's most familiar to you, and that is digestion. Okay, digestion is taking in food, breaking it down into useful components. When you go to lunch, if you eat like pizza, your body doesn't need pizza. What your body needs are the chemicals that that pizza contains. Okay, there's useful chemicals in the crust of the pizza, useful chemicals in the cheese of the pizza, useful chemicals if it's like pepperoni to like break down in the pepperoni of the pizza. Your body doesn't need pepperoni molecules. What it needs are the building blocks of those pepperonis that we can then turn into the building blocks of your body. We are literally taking the molecules inside of that pizza apart and then putting them back together to make more molecules of you. It's kind of like playing with Lego. You can build a car out of that Lego, but then you can take that car apart and then build a rocket ship. So by using the same pieces, we can build up totally different things. And that's what your body is doing with digestion. It's taking down the molecules that are contained in the food you eat and building up the molecules that your body needs. The next process of metabolism is respiration. To be clear, when we talk about respiration, and we will in more detail, a lot more detail later on in the year, respiration is not breathing. Breathing, inhaling, exhaling, that is a process we call gas exchange. You are literally exchanging one gas, oxygen, for another, carbon dioxide. Okay? That's a physical process. You're literally sucking air in and pushing air out. Respiration is a chemical process that happens inside of each and every one of your cells. I mean, to be more accurate, we should describe this as cellular respiration. So when we talk about respiration, we're talking about a chemical process, not the act of breathing. And what respiration is taking the raw materials from the food we eat and turning it into energy. So respiration is all about generating the energy that our body needs. Now, when we talk about respiration, why do we all of a sudden start thinking about breathing? Well, because for respiration to work properly, in most cases, you need oxygen. So the act of breathing is tied to the act of respiration. So inhaling oxygen with your lungs is tied to each and every one of your cells getting the oxygen it needs to make energy. Final process of metabolism is excretion. So excretion is how your body gets rid of waste that it doesn't need anymore. This is not just when you eat junk food. It's like what makes junk food junk is that it has very little that your body really needs. So when we eat healthy foods, nutritious foods, what makes it nutritious is that it actually has things that the body can use to build up new cells or turn into energy. When you eat junk food, it basically contains a lot of stuff that the body doesn't need or doesn't want. So a lot of that becomes waste. Okay, and your body has to remove that waste. Okay, and that's obviously when you go and use the potty. Okay, now if you're eating a perfectly healthy diet, you still need to remove waste from your body. The fact of the matter is your body cannot digest all the things that we eat. So even if you're eating perfectly healthy foods, you still have to use the potty. But there are other things that your body does to remove waste. I mean, you're excreting right now all over my classroom. It's disgusting. No, you're breathing. You're exhaling. Carbon dioxide is a waste product. Your body doesn't need it, doesn't want it, has to get rid of it. So you exhale, you're excreting that carbon dioxide. Okay, you're removing waste from the body. And in fact, if you didn't remove that carbon dioxide from your body, it would kill you. Okay? If I was to take a student and lock them in an airtight container, which for some reason the school won't let me do that, but if I was to lock a student in an airtight container, you would die, but most likely because of too much carbon dioxide long before you died of not enough oxygen. Okay, because every time you exhale, you're exhaling that carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide level starts to build up. And what happens is inside your body, that carbon dioxide starts a process called acidosis, which literally carbon dioxide in your blood becomes carbonic acid. So literally your blood becomes acidic, and that's bad for your body. Okay? And most likely if you're trapped in an airtight container, it's going to be too much carbon dioxide before it's not enough oxygen. Next question. Your friend claims that they can eat whatever they want and won't gain weight because they have a high metabolism. Okay, so true and false. A person can change the rate of their metabolism. The fact of the matter is it's true. Your metabolism can change, and you can actively change it. Okay. However, in order to do that, you have to do certain things with your body. Right now, as teenagers, you have pretty high metabolisms, okay, because your body is going through a lot of activity. Just puberty takes a lot of power. So right now, you guys have relatively high metabolisms. And the problem is that a lot of teenagers develop habits that carry into adulthood. Because when you reach around early to mid-20s, your metabolism starts to slow down. Because your body said, okay, we went through that puberty thing, that's all done, let's dial back the energy, we don't need that much anymore. So what happens is teenagers might sit back and say, hey, I can eat an entire pizza by myself. And then as a 20-year-old, they say, I'm going to eat an entire pizza by myself. Why am I gaining weight? It's because your body doesn't need all that material anymore. Okay, so you're developing these habits that don't carry forward because your metabolism changes over time. Now, there are ways that you can increase and decrease your metabolism. This is what exercise does for the body. So the reason why exercise aids in weight loss, so if you want to get healthy, get fit, whatever, the reason why exercise does that is you are increasing your body's demand for energy. You're hungrier, but your body says, okay, well, I'm going to start turning up the metabolism because we're doing more. Okay, kind of like back when we were in puberty, we need more energy, so we're going to crank it up a bit. Exercise can actually change your metabolism. If you just exercise and do nothing else, then you're going to see like moderate changes to your health and your fitness. Because what any doctor will tell you is that you need proper nutrition with that. And this is where like all those like fad diets and like you see commercials on TV and like pop-ups on the internet and stuff where it says, use this miracle thing, it's going to like cause you to lose weight. In small print, it says, with diet and exercise. So this miracle thing that's causing you to lose weight might do something, but it's not likely doing nearly as much as the dieting, that is eating proper nutritious food, and then the exercise, increasing your body's activity to increase your metabolism. Another characteristic that all living things share, living things need to be able to reproduce. We need to be able to make more living things. The process of reproduction is producing new individuals, or what we call offspring. With all living things, there is this imperative to survive. And this is not a specific characteristic of life, but this is something that we see all around. All living things have this kind of hard wiring to try to stay alive. Most organisms are going to do things that keep them alive, and they're going to avoid things that would potentially endanger their life. If there was a building on fire, most things, humans and otherwise, are going to try to avoid that fire because fire is dangerous. So we have this driving instinct that says we need to do the things that keep us alive. Now, it's true, we can train ourselves against that instinct. So firefighters are going to run into the burning building rather than away from the burning building. Now, it's not that their biology is failing them and they're saying, oh, well, they don't have any instinct for survival. It's that they're taking that instinct and shoving it down and saying, I got to do a job. We have this instinct for survival. And part of that driving instinct is to produce more of ourselves. This is heredity. When you have offspring, you are literally taking a little piece of yourself, namely your DNA, and you're passing it on to a new group of individuals. This drive for survival is incorporated into reproduction because if I can keep my offspring alive, then a little piece of me lives on even if I die. In some cases, a parent will put itself in danger to protect its offspring. Why? Because as long as my offspring are alive, my genetics are alive too. So there's this driving imperative to produce more of yourself. Like literally, you're making copies of yourself and pushing them on to the next generation. This is reproduction to produce the offspring, and then heredity is passing on what makes you you onto the next generation. And we'll get into a lot more about genetics later on in the year. So the next characteristic of living things is response to the environment. So organisms need to be able to react to changes in their environment. This is typically what we call stimulus. You acquire information about the world around you through your eyes, your ears, your nose, your sense of touch, your sense of taste. So you're collecting this information. This information is called stimulus. And your body needs to be able to respond to that stimulus. Loud noises! That response, that startled response, that reaction, that's programmed into your body. Okay? That gasp of air. What you're doing is you're sucking in extra oxygen because oxygen is necessary to make energy. Your heart rate increases to circulate blood through your body. And then that jittery feeling you sometimes get after you've been startled, that's adrenaline. That's your body preparing itself for action. So this is what we call the fight or flight response. Okay? If something scary happens, something unexpected, your body prepares itself from action. So say you're walking along, normal every day, and then scary clown jumps out from behind the corner. Scary clown, sudden and unexpected, okay, your body is going to react to prepare itself for action. So you have one or two options. You're going to fight, you're going to punch that clown in the face, or you're going to flight, you're going to run away. Now, how you respond might deal with your experience. Okay, so if I'm walking along and scary clown jumps out and I've been frightened by clowns before, I'm likely to run away. Now, if I'm walking along, scary clown jumps out and I'm a Navy SEAL, I'm going to, put that clown in a chokehold and take it down to the ground. Okay, so your experience can shape how you respond, but experiences can also shape your biology. Your immediate reaction to something, that startled feeling, that's a response. But if you're constantly being startled, long-term exposure can actually change your biology. And this is what we call adaptation. So let's say you have a friend. This friend is kind of a jerk. They think it's funny to jump out from behind the corner and scare you. So they do it once and they're like, ah! And they're like, ha, that was hilarious. And they decide, you know what? It's my mission. I'm going to do that every day. I'm going to find some new and innovative way to jump out and scare you. Okay, so they're hiding behind the corner, they're hiding under desks, they hide in the trash can, they're dropping down from the ceiling tiles. They find new and innovative ways to just jump out of nowhere and scare you to death. After a while, that's going to change the biology of your body. If you're expecting to be scared all the time, you could start to get nervous. Okay, where are they? Are they here? Are they under the desk? Are they where are they? It's going to happen. I know it is. We see this in organisms like rabbits, like deer, typically what we'd call prey organisms, that they're nervous that there's some sort of predator, like a wolf or something that's going to come along and try to eat me. So being nervous, being anxious, is actually a defense mechanism. This is a way that I can stay alive. I got to be alert and I got to be ready to run away. Because, a rabbit is not going to fight back. Okay, it's just going to run. The other option is that you can get desensitized to that. Your friend keeps on jumping out, and after a while, it's going to happen. When is it going to be? It's like, ah! It's like, oh, it's you again. Okay, after a while, you're not going to react to that person jumping out from behind the corner. Okay, now that can actually be a problem too, because if all of a sudden it's not your friend jumping out from behind the corner, it's scary clown with a knife, you're like, oh look, it's a clown. Oh no, it's stabbing me! So your body doesn't react in a way to prepare yourself for action. And this is essentially what firefighters and soldiers do. They prepare themselves, they basically desensitize themselves to that instinct of danger so that they can do a job, like run into a burning building or go into a battlefield. Even though your instinct should say, you know what, I shouldn't go here, this is dangerous, okay, they basically push that down and say, we got a job to do. The last characteristic of living things is maintaining homeostasis. The term homeostasis is essentially means balance. Okay? The body needs to maintain a certain balance in order to function properly. So in humans, for example, we maintain a body temperature of 98.6 degrees. If we get too hot, okay, that could be problematic. If we get too cold, that could be problematic. So our body takes certain actions to deal with being too hot or being too cold. If you get too hot, we start to sweat. Sweating actually cools our body down. Now, if we get too cold, we start to shiver. Shivering is your muscles basically moving together to warm your body up. Now, it's true, if it's really hot out, there's only so much that you can sweat before you run into problems. That's like heat exhaustion or dehydration. And if it's too cold, there's only so much your body can shiver before, you start dealing with things like hyperthermia and frostbite. Okay? But your body takes a lot of action to try to maintain that balance. Why? Because your body, the chemistry of your body, works best at 98.6 degrees. Okay? When you get sick and you have a fever, okay, that fever makes you feel awful because your body is not at the right temperature in order to function properly. Now, that fever is actually your body's response to disease and infection, and your body is basically trying to burn the infection out. Okay? Because those diseases, like those viruses, they like 98.6 degrees too. They like, this is the perfect temperature. And your body says, oh, you like that? Let's crank it up a bit and see how you like it now. Okay, so basically what your body is trying to do with a fever is it's trying to burn out that sickness, which is why you feel pretty crummy when you have a fever, is because not only are you doing something to fight the sickness, now your body is all out of whack and it's not in homeostasis. Another good example of homeostasis is in maybe an hour or two, or maybe right now, your stomach starts growling, okay, because you're hungry. Why do you get hungry? Because your body needs more nutrients. It needs raw materials to keep building more cells. It needs fuel to provide energy. So when that balance is off, okay, your stomach says, oh, I'm hungry. You start growling, and then you put food in there, that balance comes back. Now, that balance can go off in the other direction too, because it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to eat, and then I'm going to you know what, I need to eat more, and you just keep on eating. So that when you overeat, that makes you feel bad because now you're throwing the balance off too far in the other direction. All right, final question. Which characteristic of life explains an alligator's habit of basking in the sun? So we live in Florida. Periodically, there'll just be a gator lying around on like a golf course or something. Okay, why do they do that? Okay. Is this growth and development? Is it homeostasis? Is it reproduction? Or is it response to the environment?